All right. Thank you for everyone who's starting to tune in. I know the email is starting to hit inboxes and people are coming on. And then we're live on YouTube and LinkedIn and formerly known as Twitter. But excited to have this group, and it's a cool group. I think on the back of, I was just in San Francisco for the most recent YC batch, and very venture-y. Met with different VCs and recently venture-backed founders. And this is a cool conversation, I think, because it takes us out of that a bit and into the bootstrapping world. Cole and Tongbo are both former YC founders, so they've kind of lived on both sides of the culture wars, I'll call them, but we'll get into that. And excited to talk about what it's like to build a company today, on the bootstrapping side. So with that, I'll do some short and not so good intros. For me, it's easier. You've likely been here before. My name's Adam. I do a lot of these live events, and I run Sandhill. We've got a newsletter. We do these live events. We also run a big syndicate where we invest in everything from early stage to late stage stuff. But more importantly, our guests today, courtesy of Sacra.com, who I'd like to thank throughout it, and you should check out if you haven't. But first, we've got, and they'll do better intros as I mentioned, but we've got Cole. He's founder, head of product, Formspree, Form backend API and email service for Forms. Been building products for a long time, and was at the head developer of Squarespace, which I'm interested to hear his take on that, because that was a business that didn't take on venture funding for a long time, from what I understand. But was also, again, on the venture side in a past life, was a two-time YC founder, so very much kind of knows that game and that scene, as well as bubble tea, apparently, which is always helpful. But I'll let him do a much better intro in a second. And then we've got Tongbo. Tongbo is founder at Sidr Tax. I'll have him maybe pronounce it better than me, but e-commerce sales tax software, automating sales tax returns. He's an engineer kind of by training. He's been at some big companies like Pinterest, Checker, and Amplitude. I think he was there through the IPO, which is again, lots of venture kind of backed experience, and was himself a YC alum as well. So it wasn't meant to be a YC to bootstrap transition theme, but I do think that we'll end up talking about that a decent amount, which I'm excited about. So without further ado, I'll get Cole, who's at a conference, and I appreciate him taking the time to jump on, and Tongbo as well. So let me see if I can get this. I'll hide that, and we're good to go. Hey.
All right. How's it going?
Hi, Adam.
Hey, guys. I talked a bit about this a little bit before, and I gave very short intros, but before we get into it, I think the really helpful thing for everyone and for me would be to get kind of more complete backgrounds on you guys. You've been building for a long time in a number of different ways, and I think that what you were doing before you were bootstrapping is super interesting and will inform the conversation a lot. Cole, do you want to lead us off with kind of your background of full life story before we get into it?
Yeah. How far do you want me to go back?
I don't know. Let's see.
I'll go back a while.
A while. That's the right answer.
Yeah. I was in the Navy actually for a while after college. Left the Navy, went to grad school for graphics and UX stuff. I actually worked for the government doing research on like visualization and UX for probably 3 years or so. And as I was wrapping that up, this is like, 2010 roughly. The iPhone came out, and I had been really excited about that type of thing, like novel user experiences. And so started working on making games for the iPhone. That sort of transitioned into iPad games, and applied to YC back in summer 2010 with a company that was basically building iPad games back in the very earliest days of that. And then, I moved to San Francisco. I was working on that company, did that for about a year. Things weren't working, tried a bunch of other stuff. Actually reapplied to YC in 2012, was accepted for a company that was basically building print-on-demand software. So it was like, physical mail API type of product, which also didn't work out. Well, that one was doing better, but I got a lot of feedback from venture capitalists. This was a bad thing to be working on. They told me that, physical mail was not a long-term growth industry. That was likely to consolidate, and they weren't excited about funding stuff in that space, which, maybe it was just the particular VCs I was talking to. There have been some pretty awesome companies that came out.
Yeah, I was going to say, that is over the last decade, I that's definitely not been the case. I feel like there's been direct mail has continued to perform.
Sure.
But anyways, yeah.
I am totally not on top of that anymore.
Okay, you're out of the direct mail game. Okay.
Totally. Yeah. We were really, I don't know. I won't get into it right now, but if people are curious, I could talk more about that. But it was kind of when I fell in love with the web, with, APIs and building kind of developer focused products. And yeah, this was 2012, like late 2012. I think that was also when, I want to say like Node, somebody's going to get me for having the timeline wrong on this, but I think Node.js actually came out pretty soon, pretty close to then. And certainly like, static websites were kind of like not really a thing. At least people didn't really talk about that, but that was interesting. There was a developer framework called it's called Bootstrap. Anyway, the company started up being Backlift. Backbone.js. Yeah, geez.
There it is.
Backbone.js came out, and there were some other like frameworks like that were out at that time. I was focusing on, I was doing like a Heroku for Backbone.js apps, which is kind of absurd when I say it out loud. But that turned into this thing, Brace.io, which, worked on that for a while, and never really saw what we were hoping for. I mean, the scope of it was like, take out WordPress and take on the entire world of web applications. So it was a little bit overscoped, maybe.
maybe just a little bit. Yeah. That's good ambition though. Good venture.
Yeah, I mean that. You gotta shoot big. We didn't really get the traction that we needed. Sort of wrapped that up. Ended up, some of that was interesting. The experience was interesting to Squarespace. Ended up, making a deal with them and going to work for them for a while. Moved out to New York, worked for them for about 3 years. But around the same time, this Formspree thing was sort of started as an open source project and was growing, and that the rest is sort of beyond that, which I can talk about in a bit. But cool. That was my path to launching Formspree, I guess.
Yeah, interesting. So and we'll get into this afterwards in the transition out. But you were at Venture World, then to Squarespace, like acqui-hire type of situation. Yep. Then within acqui-hire, you started the Formspree stuff as a side project, like and then transitioned out of that. Got it. Interesting. And one of the key things that I'm excited to get in there, because I've had this experience myself personally as well, like it's almost like a startup journeyman experience, like where you've worked, you've been trying, like you've been doing a bunch of stuff, and how that can, and you're working hard at just, these are like high risk bets, obviously, that can, I think, and whatever, we'll talk about this more, but can lead to bootstrapping and a little bit more like sustainable, like I'm going to build something that's valuable and it's going to pay me and we're going to work on it. It might not be, a $10 billion business, but it's going to work. I have more control of it working on a smaller scale. Is interesting. Tongbo, we'll get to the same thing. And I'm interested to hear similarities, differences, and all that. But would you, be willing to give a similar intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So my career started at Pinterest and Checker, and both of them are nowadays pretty successful startup. Pinterest gone IPO'd and have something like a $20 billion of valuation. When I joined, it was a fairly small company, 100 something people. And at Checker, I joined when it had around 100 people. So both experience was really helpful in really shaping my understanding of the venture world and how startup companies are built. Because both companies have very big dream. For Pinterest, I was on the early monetization team, which is kind of there to build out their ad system. When we start building it out, we already have tens of millions of users every month, which to me, like as a new grad, is a concept that's very hard to comprehend. It's like, how do you have that many users without wanting to make any money? It's like, is that how business works?
It's time for a monetization strategy. Yeah.
And I was the initial group of people, like around 10 people, starting to look into how to really build out like an ad system. So that really taught me that if you have a very big dream, you can actually start to build out an audience and then figure out the monetization along the way. Maybe good, maybe bad influence, but that is how I started my career. And my second job at Checker, which is very different. It's a SaaS company helping a lot of the on-demand companies like Uber and Lyft do background checks. They're actually profitable very early on. When I joined only with 100 people, they are like, oh, we are actually profitable with $100 million in revenue. I was shocked because how big of a difference it is between their model and Pinterest model. Mm-hmm. I think both companies are very successful nowadays. They just took on very different route to success. And then by the end of my time at Checker, I spent around 2.5 years there. I decided to start a company with the product manager that I work with at Checker, and we got accepted into YC. And the reason really is that we saw how products are built, and we feel like we are actually a pretty full stack in terms of understanding how to build products. So we want to try something on our own. We don't have a very mature idea. It's not like an idea is there calling us to do it. It's just that we're so motivated by the concept of we can build something we own ourselves. So we got into YC. The idea was building a kind of like conversational assistant for the customer success people. Nowadays, if you think about it, it sounds like a pretty good idea for the time. But we were definitely early back then. It was 2018. So we went through a really tough time selling to larger organizations, because if you think about it, by the time you have a customer success team, your company is already pretty big. And we are a team of 2 people trying to sell this very immature software to those larger companies. Is very tough. So it was a great experience, taught us a lot about how to build product and approach people. But the whole process of selling to each individual company was very nerve-wracking and drained our energy a lot. Mm-hmm. So after trying for about 1.5 years, we said that this is a bit much for us. and that's how I went back to the industry. I got a job at Amplitude, a data company. My background is a data engineer, so that particular position is actually a great fit for my skill set. And it wasn't too hard for me to really get up to speed and get very comfortable at what I'm supposed to do at Amplitude. But because the YC experience actually planted a seed. So now I always feel like, I can build something, but I need to be very thoughtful and mindful about what I'm building. So this time, I won't start something until I have a fairly strong confidence there's a need for me to do it. And that I can talk more about it later. That brings us to my current startup called Sidr Tax. So we're a sales tax automation software for the e-commerce businesses. yeah, so that's the kind of the journey of how I go from just not knowing anything to what I'm doing.
Yeah, very interesting. And it's again, and I've had my own fair share, straight out of school at a company, applied to YC, tried to go the YC route. They told me it wasn't going to scale, went and did a different company, got acqui-hired by a very venture-backed company, saw the very well-funded venture-backed journey. And now I'm in more of an investing role. And so I've had similar kind of experiences. A lot of that resonates. I think that that idea of what you described of when you first applied to YC, being I just want to build something. I'm ready. I think I'm equipped to build something. I need to build something. And YC does a great job of bringing people in with that. But I also, I look back on the first companies I started, and I just didn't think that hard. I wanted to do something, and I didn't rather than having to do rather than having something be I can't not do this, which are very different approaches. But so I think bringing it back into, or I guess the decision to bootstrap and that transition that you guys both had, and obviously it sounds like it's less of a specific point in time and more of a journey into it, where you've had experiences that inform how you're thinking about building a company. I think that VC does a great job of trying to, and YC specifically, if you're an ambitious product builder, just come here, we'll show you what to do, jump into what we'll show you how. And then when you think longer and harder about it, then you actually understand that there's both a VC, you don't have to be a venture-backed business in order to build products, despite what it might feel like when you're first kind of getting into it. When you think back about that experience and the decision to bootstrap versus raise money, because again, in Cole specifically, right, you're at your job, you see Formspree kind of starting to take a kind of picking up some speed, maybe deciding to do it full time. Did you think about the VC path and then evaluate each one, or were you just out on VC completely by that point? What was that transition like?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm not sure how intentional it was. It kind of, at the beginning, Formspree was an open source project. We didn't have any kind of monetization built in at the beginning for it either. It was just kind of an idea. We thought it was cool. We thought it would be helpful. And I didn't consider really working on it full time for a long time. It took us a year before we decided, how or what we would charge for that. I guess we always thought that there would be some way that we would monetize it. It was pretty kind of an obviously monetizable thing. But as an open source project, that was also kind of an interesting, challenge of how we would do that and how we would have, sort of an open source version and a paid version that was hosted. And I think, it wasn't until after a few years of it growing sort of without a ton of attention actually being paid to it, that, I was sort of started to think maybe I should focus on this full time. So, and at that point, there wasn't really this need. I mean, I think when I was working on other stuff, and when I first, applied to YC, these were all, again, just, I was naive. I had ideas. I thought it would be really cool to start a company, but I didn't really know what that meant. And in a way, YC sort of did all the thinking for me a little bit for how to do it. How do you start a company? I mean, we just applied and we got in, and then it was startups 101. Here's all the things you need to be doing. So that didn't feel like a decision process. It was sort of, this was an opportunity that presented itself and we just jumped for it. My co-founder and I at the time, back in 2010. With this one, it was a little similar. Formspree sort of chose me. It had been, not something I was intentionally trying to build. I wasn't intentionally trying to bootstrap. I wasn't even really thinking that it would be a company. But as the momentum grew and the traction grew and the opportunity sort of became obvious, then it was just a question of like investing more of my own time, investing myself in it, and kind of following the way that it was going. Also, I guess I was a little burnt out a bit on the like VC side of things. I think having done that for 4 years or whatever in San Francisco, and not necessarily loving it. Like, I don't know, I definitely wasn't a great fundraiser. Like, I didn't enjoy that process. So it just didn't naturally seem like the thing I had to do. Also, like Formspree, the scope of Formspree, compared to like Brace, which was like take over all of the web.
Take over WordPress.
Was such a just felt like such a small. I remember when I was like gonna change, when I was gonna like leave Squarespace and work on it full time, I was kind of embarrassed to talk about it. I was just like, I'm working
because it's so like scoped down.
Yeah, it was tiny. It felt tiny compared to the kind of thinking I was doing, in Silicon Valley, which was sort of weird in retrospect. Like, this just felt so small. And so it didn't really occur to me. I mean, I don't think I was wrong about this. It wasn't something I could really pitch to VC. Like, there wasn't this like $1 billion take over the world story, that I felt
that you could even look, that you would want, that you would want to give, or that you were being like called to give. It was growing and doing well, but in like a niche, like, scoped down way.
Yeah. Well, and that also was a little bit, I mean, I think that's been kind of the challenge with Formspree to some extent, is that I think, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but I think, good bootstrap ideas typically are small in a specific way. They're kind of like small within a particular, like
focused.
They have a natural niche that they're targeting, and that niche can be kind of like taken over, but you tend to have like these vertical products that tend to do well with bootstrap companies. Formspree, even though it was like targeting developers and felt like a small thing, it was very horizontal in terms of its applications. And that's the big struggle with Formspree, is that like, we've got like this tiny horizontal product that we have to build a company with, and we don't have the advantage, I think, on the marketing side of having like a very targeted like community that we're trying to kind of win over.
It's horizontally focused. It's niche, but like not in like the classic bootstrap, like of this one very specific community that like you're building it for them. Like it's verticalized in that way. It's like it's the same volume but horizontally rather than like vertically. Interesting. And talking about, I feel like it's interesting because Cole's story, I feel like there are like opportunities that present themselves, and with you, it feels like you sought out YC kind of more intentionally, of like, I want to do the VC track. And then when you left Amplitude, it was, tell me a little bit about that transition out. Like, did you work on it within Amplitude? Was it like a slow transition? Did you always know it was going to be bootstrapped? Like, was that a conscious decision? Yeah. What was that process like?
Yeah. So since I like to hack on stuff, I think this is actually the habit I got from the YC experience. Whenever I see some interesting opportunity, I always like to spend just a little bit of time to dive a bit deeper into understanding the problem itself, and even maybe trying out and create a small prototype. So what I'm doing now is actually something I noticed while I was still working at Amplitude, and I spent a little bit of time on weekends to build out a small prototype to see how things worked. And the previous YC experience actually introduced me to the whole e-commerce world, because I ended up building the customer success software that bridge Shopify and Zendesk. So that's what I ended up doing. So I got some exposure, but nowhere close to some good idea that I can spend time on. But opens up a way for us to get exposure, and that's how I actually got introduced to this particular problem that I'm currently working on, and yeah, while I was at Amplitude, I noticed that this is something very interesting, and I built a very, very rough prototype and throw it onto the marketplace, which is kind of like the app store for Shopify merchants. And I would say this is the magic of large ecosystems these days. Shopify being one very popular one of them, is it actually makes customer acquisition just so much easier compared to what I did when I was at YC.
Yeah,
to sell each individually, like sell cycle 2-3 months, and to close a single contract. Nowadays, people just install and feel like, oh, this is something I need. Here's my credit card. And I haven't even got involved in the whole process. And they started paying. So that is just a huge difference. And that really taught me that nowadays, just the possibility of building a bootstrap business while making it self-sustainable is a lot more easier than before, because people are now familiar with the idea of, oh, this is something useful, I need to pay for it. And I do not need to scrutinize and have like a 3-month-long sales cycle to start using it. If I want to increase the contract size, maybe I want to talk to a salesperson there, but it doesn't have to start that way. So that really changed the game and make it just so much more feasible to build something in the bootstrap style.
And so you're working on it on the weekends, it starts, you launch a prototype, it gets some traction, and then it was always and by virtue of the scope of the Shopify ecosystem aspect of it, that's what kind of, again, not necessarily like, oh, I could go the VC route or I could go the bootstrap route, but more of like by virtue of the product, it's kind of obviously like to you at the time, like clearly just a bootstrap product and not something that you would consider on the VC side. Like did you consider both type of thing, or like, because I think there are companies that are trying, in a venture-backed way, trying to tackle sales tax, but it's much like it's broader, I think, like the Shopify ecosystem, right? So was it like a conscious decision to not, expand the scope or try to make it a bigger pitch, or was it something that you felt, or was it just you felt like it was natural to stay where the demand was, which is where you originally launched it?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So one thing I actually learned from my YC experience is to be able to raise a good funding round, you need to have big dreams. To present like a TAM. And then back then I was finding myself trying to do this TAM exercise, trying to find out how many customer success people are there in the world, and how do I get a percentage of. I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, is my product really that good that so many customer success have to use it? Now it shifts me to something very generic that a lot of customer success people need to use. And I find it gradually shift me away from what I originally want to build. So I'm not saying this is a bad thing. If you are actually working on something that's going to be big, that's the way to go. But if you are not, then it actually can be a distraction, pulls you away from what you are good at, and pulls you away from a gold mine that you potentially found. But maybe a smaller idea. So this applies to what I'm doing now. So whenever I tell people, hey, I'm building a sales tax application for Shopify folks, if it's a person from VC, he's going to ask, oh, when are you going to expand to another marketplace, another ecosystem? And like, what about non-e-commerce? Like he's doing this exercise for me.
He's trying to expand your TAM, and you're saying, no, I actually don't. I've done that before, and I'm okay, actually, like without expanding my TAM.
But when I'm looking at my business, it's like, if I'm able to just get 10% of every Shopify merchant onto my software, it's going to be a huge product.
Yeah.
Shopify is actually a very large ecosystem these days.
Yeah.
But that's not usually the way it works for venture-backed companies, because the TAM seems very small, and it's very hard to convince people you're going to get a huge cut of this market.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
It's so funny. Sorry, go ahead, Cole.
It feels like the hardest part of fundraising. It's like, that sort of switch in mindset from, I've gone through that exercise so many times too. It's like, we're building something. This is the product goal. This is the problem it solves. And then you've got to just go like way out.
What's like 100x of that?
Yeah. Like, we're landing here, and then the expand part is like, well, look at all the other verticals and look at in a way it's almost kind of easy, right? Like, you can always kind of tell that story. You just have to be comfortable with, first of all, just like the fierce amount of bullshit that's involved there.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, a more optimistic version is like the vision, right?
Yeah.
Like, how big is the vision? The other side, the other word is, how fierce is the bullshit? How fierce is?
It's got to be you have to have that rabid appetite.
Yeah.
But even there, it's like, it's not that I don't know that it's that hard oftentimes to do it. It's just that, the flip side of that, of taking that big bite is the expectations that come with that. And that just, you've always got this process of like, okay, I'm doing this and then this, and it does distract you, I think. And it can also weigh on you, I think, in a way. And I feel like that, for me, when I was working on the big thing, I almost forgot about the small next steps. When I was working on, this like, take over the world platforms for single page apps, I was cramming all these crazy like features in there that were like for this bigger idea. And in a way that, this is dumb. I think, everyone knows not to do this, but it did sort of erode my like focus on creating that initial thing that was really solving a problem well, like, getting the like few customers who really loved it, as opposed to like seeing how we can get as many customers that are interested in it,
So much easier said than I've had this personal, like the company that I applied to IC with straight out of school, mattress rental business, great cash flow business. But I was like, I don't care. Actually, I want to be like I found out what startups were, and it was like, I want to be in venture land. Like, I don't care about the cash. Everyone thought Casper was a good business at the time. So I had that kind of going for me. And then second business was a software business. And similarly, it was like solving a niche issue. But then when you get into you're going to raise money, it can't be a niche issue. Like, people can love your product, but it's got to be a lot of people, you have to, and ultimately when we got acqui-hired, the decision to get acqui-hired rather than to go out for another round is because we've stopped believing our own, like we had the big vision pitch. Like, I'd given it a bunch of times, the first, small round of funding that we have done, like how I got my co-founders to join me. It was the path we were going down. And then we learned more. And it was like, this is not what people are asking us to build, actually. Like, it's not, and it's a hard thing because, you need the big vision in order to get the money to keep the thing alive. And so it's like these incentives are funky. I think one of the things you both touched on, I think we talked about it before a little bit, the bootstrapping persona, I think, is something that got brought up, but I ultimately, I think that, maybe a better way to talk about it is in terms of like being comfortable with it being focused in a world where people are kind of wanting you to make up a bigger thing. Like, rather than just being like, it takes a certain amount of confidence to say, we just do this one thing like really well, and that's it. Like, are you going to do other stuff? Like, no, just this thing. And like you mentioned, leaving Squarespace and that conversation, or talking about like, talking to VCs or asking about, maybe expanding ecosystems. And like, I think it's hard to do that. It takes a certain amount of like experience. It takes a certain amount of basically like understanding the decision that you're making and doing so in an intentional way. And then you've got VC people calling it like lifestyle businesses, right? Like, which is a funny like branding exercise on the VC side where it's like, yeah, but you're not really doing it, right? It's, it's a low key thing, which is absolutely not the case, it's like the trope about like rental properties, like passive income, quote unquote, like where it's like, it's not passive at all. Like your whole life's fucked up because you're like chasing down, dealing with this rental property. And I feel like, the lifestyle business thing is a similar part. I think it would be interesting to hear you both talk about like how that, like more on that kind of experience, because I'm sure you've both been in the venture ecosystem before, and now making a conscious decision to be more focused in the thing that you're building. Is it something that comes up in your mind? Is it a like pressure that you feel, or is it in the background? Like, do you keep up to date with venture stuff? Yeah. What are some reactions to the the lifestyle business trope, and sometimes I feel like it has like a connotation in a stupid way, right? But like, do you laugh at it? Do you take it personally? What's the reaction?
Yeah, there's one time I was just at a event in San Francisco, and on the same table next to me it was a VC person, and then he was asking me, "Oh, what are you working on?" So I told him, "Oh, here is the sales tax
classic
automation
SF.
software."
SF.
Yeah, yeah, and then I'm like, yeah, we're bootstrapped, profitable, and just growing, staying within the narrow focused product area that we're working on. And then his immediate response was, "Oh, so it's actually not a startup." And then I was like, "Oh, actually, for those people, startup means taking a lot of money and build something really big. Yeah. So starting a company is not a startup." That was actually just maybe he talked about this very unintentionally, but I'm gonna remember that conversation forever, because now it's like, okay, I'm building a company that's potentially gonna sustain my entire life, because actually it pays out more money than a software engineer in SF, but somehow it's not a startup for a lot of people. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, like for
That's
me,
zinger, it's like,
yeah, exactly. Like that's the sort of thing. Like, oh, so like like lifestyle business. Like, I mean, maybe just business. Maybe just business. It's a business. Like it's, but yeah,
I like that framing. I like calling it an internet small business.
In
the way that it's like, it's like a corner store but virtual.
But yeah, that's funny. And it's funny how those types of things stick with you also, like because I think and I'd be interested in Cole, you're based in Seattle, correct? You're at a conference right now, but normally based in Seattle. Whereas Tongbo's, in the heart of the beast in SF, where like everyone, what are you working on? The SF question, like, are you at a startup? Are you in a startup? Do you like, compared to, I feel like maybe it would be harder in Silicon, at the heart of it in SF. To Cole, like, do you run into that stuff on have you had similar experiences to that in your cycle?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know that I've had too many like I feel it a little bit, but I don't know that I've had. I mean, I certainly haven't had people asking me what I'm working on that much.
Yeah, that's an SF.
Yeah. And I'm here in SF now, actually talking about we should get a coffee.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I think, one thing I wasn't prepared for, though, like, I don't think it bothers me too much, the lifestyle business, or is it a startup or kind of conversation. I like the sort of, I mean, it's absurd, but I kind of feel like, I like the comparing myself to like people that are like, starting small businesses, almost like, entrepreneurial local town kind of.
Yeah.
But I think the thing I wasn't prepared for was how little people care when you're doing a bootstrap company. Like, really, nobody cares at all. Like, any kind of success you have, like, you can have life-changing success. You can reach a huge personal revenue milestone, and it's like there's not going to be any external interest.
Yeah.
When you're working on a startup, just getting funding is a story.
Yeah, you get an article about it. Yeah.
Today on TechCrunch, which I guess nobody reads, but like, you see articles about, this startup got funded, did another round or whatever. And like, you're not, there's no external validation. Well, outside your customers, obviously, but like, there's nobody else that's going to give you a pat on the back, because of your career move or whatever. There's no like, there's no audience for it. It's like, trying to get, for a while, I was like throwing my name out to podcast producers and being like, well, I'm building this and I've been doing this, and we, and just people don't care.
Yeah.
Which is a little isolating. I think, kind of going back though to the idea of that, like, that decision point, I still think that, like, there is, even if you start kind of in a bootstrappy type environment, there's still, like, if you're doing well, there's kind of always the option, to start trying to pitch it with the TAM story. And,
if the TAM does, if you feel like the TAM changes, that's, I do think very true. And there's some awesome stories of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's more honest. It comes across at least more honest, where it's like, I was doing this thing, I didn't need money from anybody, and then this, like, this opportunity hit me over the head, and now I have to do it.
Right.
Is like,
I think it does just kind of come down to, like, what you want to focus on, like what you're interested in. And I think the companies that tend to go that way have somebody on the team that would rather focus on that than focus on product, than focus on, like, the problem they set out to solve. You kind of need both personalities within a VC, trajectory type of company. And maybe one thing, I don't know about you, Tongbo, but, like, that's not me. I guess it's not just like what I've gravitated towards, and it's not where my mind goes automatically. I like the problem solving part of it. And maybe that's just like, it's kind of the DNA of your founding team. Is it VC type DNA or is it bootstrap type DNA?
Yeah. Tongbo, does that resonate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always been a problem solver. Even when I was working at larger companies, my satisfaction comes from whenever, by the way, I still do a lot of the customer support chat with my customers. My satisfaction comes from the fact that they say that, hey, you're providing a great service, helping me to solve a big headache dealing with the government on the compliance side. I feel so satisfied. That's more than maybe getting a few $1 million from a funding round. And the fact that the company is profitable and not going to go out of business unless something horrendous happened. Maybe to Shopify disappeared. My company is also going to disappear. So I sleep very well at night. My mental health is amazing at the moment. So
maybe there's lifestyle. There's the lifestyle. The mental health. It's a mental health business.
Yeah. So I just want to throw in, like, my mental health and physical health as a startup founder was the worst. And, as a bootstrap founder, it's amazing too.
Yeah.
It's
so, I mean, I came to a similar conclusion after my last business. We got acqui-hired, and people start asking, what are you going to do next? You're going to do something else. You're starting something new. Like, there's that, people kind of look to you for that, or like when you're in that next phase. I'm sure when you guys were at, you're at Amplitude and you're at Squarespace, like, you're kind of, especially in VCs, there's a lot of VCs whose job it is to ping people, like you, when you leave Amplitude, when you leave Squarespace, like, hey, what are you up to? What's your next thing or whatever. And I had a real moment about trying to, being honest with myself about what I was interested in doing, and how when you look at, and I've been, fortunate enough to be on the investor side a little bit, and to be able to stay connected to startups in this way. And, like, you got to be a little psycho to be the real VC backed, like the real thing on the VC side. Cause, and Cole said it, like, the ambition is just, like, it's crazy. It's a crazy person thing to do and to be like consumed by, and to be the real version of what a VC backed founder I think should be. It's not very balanced. Like I'm a pretty balanced guy. Like I think almost I've come to the conclusion that maybe I'm a little bit too reasonable. Like I like my family time. Like I like my, and that until and I've had enough experiences now at this point of like doing stuff for the sake of doing this stuff, just because I wanted to build things, and VCs will pay for you to build things, that like, I've realized, that kind of, and that, what the real, having what a real VC backed business is and what you can maybe raise money for. And it's a hard, I think, being honest with yourself exercise when other people are saying that like something else might be, more glamorous, or, you get headlines for a certain type of thing and you don't get headlines for the other thing. And maybe you want to fit into the other one. You're like, actually, that's not really what I'm into. I think there's a lot of founders. I think there's a lot of founders in YC that go through this. I think there's a lot of, people in SF that deal with this. There's a lot of like builders in general that it's a hard thing to be like honest about with yourself about what type of builder you are when you're kind of being pushed to be a certain way.
I do think there is one characteristic that bootstrap founders need to have that isn't always present with your sort of VC folks or VC focused, I guess, founders. And I think that's patience. Like I think things. I mean, I think the fundamental, I don't think it's controversial difference between probably bootstrapping and VC is just speed of growth, speed of I mean, obviously, like everything, you got to grow your team faster because you're getting the money to do that. And you have to, as a result, have revenue that grows faster, all that. So, if you're impatient kind of person, or that, you don't want to work on something for, 5 years at least, I think it's probably not, it's not the right approach. And I have there's a very specific trajectory for a venture capital startup. Like every startup that takes funding is on a very particular racetrack or path. And I think Gary Tan said something in a X post or Twitter post lately that was like, startups are pass fail. And I think it is kind of like, if you're on the track, you're passing, right? You're building a startup that could reach, in whatever the appropriate time frame is, get to the $1 billion valuation or whatever it is to get everybody, to be made good who invested in you. And if you're not there, it's depending on how far you fall off, at some point you're just written off. But like I think for there's just like so many. There's like one success state and a ton of failure modes. Some of them are lucrative. I mean, certainly like you can fail up in startups when you get enough funding and you're in the right environment. But it's really just like one success and a bunch of failure modes. And obviously startups or bootstrap companies have a lot of success modes. I mean, they can be side businesses forever and still be successful to you. They can be, you can sell them and kind of have almost, you can have an outcome, an exit. And then you can also just run them forever, kind of like we have. We're almost at 10 years now.
Wow.
So there's all those different types of success states, I think. But I do think that like, when you're just getting started, there's kind of like I think there's like a glide path you should be looking for. And I'm going to unveil it now. That's all right. My bootstrap founder trajectory, I think people can argue with me. Certainly, I would love that. But I think that like, I'll try and do it fast. But basically, I think, when you're just getting started, okay, first 3 months, just try to make 1,000 MRR. It's going to be MRR. It's going to be basically like revenue based. But, get your 1,000 MRR at the beginning, doing whatever you're doing. Then try and get to like 15% month over month. Like this is like half of what, half or more of what you got to do as a startup founder, right? You got to be doing 20, 30, 40, whatever. But just try and get your 15% month over month for the first year. That'll get you to around 50K. And so then after that year, now it's like basically for the next 5 years, you got to double every year. Like maybe this is like, I have no idea. Like basically I'm getting us to $1 million in ARR after 5 years, which is definitely a failure for a VC-backed startup, but it's a pretty awesome outcome for anybody who, is bootstrapping and works on something for, half a decade. So that doubling every year, that's 6% month over month, just 6% growth every month. Try and manage that. I mean, obviously over the course of 4 years, as you approach that $1 million MRR, it's going to get way, way harder. So you want to front load that and be closer to the 10% at the beginning, every month. But that's my trajectory for Bootstrap.
That's how, yeah. And you can see the line, like you can see how different the graph is where like, you have to, in order to show and in order to feel like, people do want the problem solved, like there should be some growth in the beginning. It needs to like, people need to buy it. It needs to resonate.
I mean, this isn't about convincing anyone other than yourself that the opportunity cost is not too high, right? Yeah. But it also kind of, like it sets you up for like, all right, you're going to need at least a year basically, and probably 2 years to go without, I mean, also just to be clear, this is not the trajectory that Formspree was on. If I was gonna, like start my next bootstrap thing, this is kind of what I would be hoping for.
How you would be convincing yourself.
Yeah, because I think at any point in time, if you're, like, I mean that trajectory, I haven't actually done this math to figure out like, how it would compare to as a software engineer, just like, getting good stock options and a good salary. I mean, when I look at like all my friends that instead of doing like bootstrap thing, just like kept working at, like any of the
big ones.
People working at Stripe or people, like those people way more successful. But like, I wouldn't trade my experience for anything. I think, that is, I think, kind of like a little bit of the edge of between like, all right, maybe I can do something else. Everyone's opportunity cost, of course, is different too. So
Tongbo, did you do that sort? Because you mentioned like, it making more than a software engineering salary. Is that did you do that sort of math when you were making decisions to go and do it full time and to transition?
I think the economics is actually super important for bootstrap founders, and my math is a little bit different, but overall the thinking process is very similar to what Cole had. So I've been working at larger companies for many years, so almost come as a disadvantage for me because now I'm losing all of those income. For me, I set myself like a break-even point. So at this point, I at least break even, and then everything beyond that is what I'm making additionally. Plus, I have all the freedom of where I work, and I can decide to delegate to people if I want to. No one can force me to work in the office every day of the week. No one can do that to me now. So those are the benefits, but there is a break-even point. So when I started this, I'm like, oh, okay, so this is the break-even point. I need to get there as quickly as I can, but I'm gonna allow myself some time to get there. And I know the moment I get there, my life is gonna be so much better. It's because as long as my business is there, it's gonna be very sustainable. So I would say if I'm gonna do this again, or for any people that wants to consider bootstrap, set yourself like a break-even point, and that is your target to get there. There are many different ways of doing your bootstrap business to get there. Some using marketing, some not. Some building like a community. Like whatever you do, that is your goal. And just know that once you hit that, your life is going to change.
One of you guys mentioned earlier, and Cole mentioned that sometimes it can be kind of isolating, and I'm sure, your experience of running Sidr compared to, working at big businesses, but there are some, bootstrap founder communities. Like there's definitely some loudness on Twitter. My algorithm definitely fed it to me for a long period of time. Do you guys participate in any of that? Do you have any thoughts on it? It's an interesting, there's some very loud kind of bootstrappers, but I think most bootstrappers are more like just kind of working on their business. What do you have any takes on that?
I do. I certainly do. So after working on this idea for a while, I think this is actually a key difference between bootstrapping and being venture backed. I feel this strong sense of loneliness because I'm in SF. I feel like almost no one is like the way I'm thinking about things, and that feels horrible. There's just one day I went to Twitter. I really trying to find like a bootstrapper, and maybe I just want to talk it out my thought process and how this thing make me like it's a successful business, but at the same time I feel so lonely. And there's this guy called Damon Chan. So his company is called Testimonial. And now he's also building PDF.ai. I just shoot him a message. I'm like, I need to talk to you. Of course, I phrase it very nicely. That is my intention. And out of my surprise, he actually gave me 30 minutes to just talk through it. And my loneliness got just like solved for a good amount of time. And I'm able to focus and really get it up and running and hit that break-even point that I was talking about. So in my opinion, having someone that think in a very similar way to bounce off idea with you, to talk to you is very important. That was my experience as a bootstrapper.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And it's funny that you mentioned Testimonial, because that's one of the people I'm definitely aware of. Cole, you mentioned it too at one point.
You're also doing it solo, right?
Are you solo, or is there anybody else on the team with you?
That's another problem. I'm solo. If I'm a co-founder, that's a lot easier.
We started with 3 co-founders at Formspree. We actually bought one out. I've never met this person. It's kind of a side story in person. Like our third co-founder lives in Brazil and, worked on it at the beginning. We bought him out, probably around the same time that I started focusing on it full time. I love this guy, but I've never met him in person.
That's funny. Good internet friend story.
But my co-founder, Rohit, is awesome. And I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the people on our team and the relationships I built there. I think we had a good set of people. With 3 co-founders at the beginning, it didn't feel lonely. Now, being remote is its own thing. Just like intellectually, I didn't feel like I was totally out in the middle of nowhere. The remote thing is a whole different story. They're sort of like Seattle is hard because I would like being probably in San Francisco from a professional perspective or kind of a social perspective, I think. I'm also married. I spent 4 years in New York. New York was great, for having a social life. So I've never personally felt lonely doing it. Excuse me. But professionally, it does feel.
Professionally, it's just different. It's its own little, and it goes back to what you talked about before. Like people just don't care. Like it's like people are like, okay, interesting. Don't know what that means. Don't care. What else? We talk about some other stuff. One thing that, and I know, and this is what we'll wrap up with, but necessary annoying AI comment. So there's a couple of things that I think are interesting. And one of them ties in. One is just being able to do more. Like if you guys have felt that or not, I think it's talked about a lot. Like, these big enterprises being more efficient and stuff like that. And I think that if anyone would be able to like feel the benefit, it should be, you have full autonomy over like the tools you use, how you do it. So I'm interested in that aspect of it. And then the second thing is that there's the classic Altman, quote in one of his, and he's maybe the best fundraiser of, all time, and his ability to talk about, this math, the biggest TAM ever conceived. But he talks about like there was a quote about like the one person.
I'm so excited to hear this quote. I haven't heard this quote.
Yeah, so, no, it's like a one person $1 billion business.
Okay.
Was that like, it's like, at some point in the future, I think that, one person will be able to run $1 billion business solo. And having spent some time as a solo founder myself, one of my first things I ever thought about was, I can't imagine having that big of a business and just choosing to be alone, like just surrounded by bots.
Yeah.
Like it's like a crazy situation to me. I'm like, what is, maybe you could, but like, why would you do that? I guess to a certain degree. And like, I guess the trade-offs between, and maybe Tongbo can mention, like the trade-offs between, solo and team. Like Cole, you have the different stuff, but like, I guess to circle back on the first part of it, have you felt benefits of AI in your like, actual like making more money for the business?
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah, so for me, because we actually are a very lean team. Now I'm no longer a one-person team, but a lot of the stuff is still when you do a lot of research online, and AI actually really help us to do a lot of the information gathering, and we also do a lot of the process automation. You can think of like, since we're tax filing, we actually need to directly integrate with the government. So I'm always very open to using AI to facilitate some of the process there. I'm constantly seeking ways. Of course, we need to maintain certain accuracy, but at the same time, we want to reduce the manual part of our entire operation process. So yeah, I think AI has been very helpful for us already, and going forward, it's going to just be even more helpful, because for bootstrappers, we're all about making sure there's a good enough margin, reduce the amount of manual work, and making sure we actually stay profitable, and continue to grow responsibly.
Yeah. Cole, how about you?
I think for me, okay, so I'm probably not the best one to talk about this. I think like there are two, in my experience so far, killer AI apps that have really changed my workflow. One is AI is incredible at generating SQL queries and like any kind of analytics work that I'm trying to do. I used to feel like I had to do all this research or whatever. Now, I mean,
it's type it in the right way, like fucking the different little, this means that.
It's built into a lot of tools, but also like, if you just have like one of those, if you use ChatGPT, for example, and you set up your own GPT, they've got these like GPTs you can make. And in the context, you just dump your SQL tables, into the context. Like this is my schema. You can just ask ChatGPT to make, like give me, all the users that do X, Y, Z, and it generates the SQL impeccably. You just copy paste that into whatever client you're using. It's super fast to do just like analytics, I think, that kind of query based analytics with AI. And that to me is like, it's almost like, you would have to hire an experienced data person for that in the past. So that job is gone. I think the other thing that it's been really great for just personally is just like, this is really stupid, but just like I have like a little command line client that's built into my terminal, and I just like don't have to remember any CLI stuff anymore. Like I just plain language ask, in my terminal to do something, and I get like a command line, to do it. So for just like, grepping, I don't know, whatever, just like all the sysadmin stuff that's also like super hard to do. I feel like a lot of that is pretty fast to automate. I think at a higher level, like AI, it's basically like, it's an amplifier. Whatever you were doing already, it'll help you do it faster. It'll help you scale it up. If your business is content, you can do 10x more content. If your business is code, you can like, scaffolding out a project that used to take a week, you probably do it in a couple of days. I mean, it does take your existing abilities and kind of like put them on steroids. But I think the thing though that is, and definitely people have talked about this, but it kind of just accrues the value to like people that already have an advantage to some extent. Like I think I'm super interested in seeing how it turns out is the whole like AI search thing, like, Perplexity and all these tools that sort of do like that are sort of search replacements. It seems like from my experience that a lot of that, that like the SEO problem, right? Like the effort that you've invested in SEO actually just translates directly into AI search. Like the stuff that's getting the most hits in traditional search is showing up in these AI responses. In a way, they're just kind of doing the search for you. And so we're like investing a lot right now in trying to like double down on our SEO game and get, like a pretty comprehensive SEO strategy through, even though it doesn't feel like it's directly targeting, like top of funnel is not really our problem right now. I mean, we have a ton of people that come in at the top, it's like from there to actual conversion, that's, it's the activation and conversion steps that are the hardest for us. And that's where the highest leverage, but we're still pumping a lot of effort right now. We hired somebody dedicated to do this, and we're focusing a lot on creating, 3 to 5 articles a week, trying to put them out, trying to get to 100 articles and targeting these like SEO clusters and doing all that sort of like hardcore SEO stuff, because we want to make sure that like when people go into, I mean, this isn't the only reason, but I mean, I think one of the things we see is that when people use ChatGPT and they ask how to build a form, like oftentimes we're the only solution that it suggests. And I think that's because we've already got this SEO advantage, and it's just sort of like multiplying it.
Yeah, interesting. Where it's like, and so it goes back to the first point where it just supercharges whoever was. But now there's not even. So if you Google search whatever the right form builder to use, maybe you'd be close to the top. But there are still other options in there. Whereas now it's just like you're either first or you're not involved. Like you're either the top one or you're not involved, and that is an interesting like, I guess theme more generally too, where it's like if you have an advantage already, and like maybe you're ahead by a couple steps, and now AI is just gonna like extend it considerably. Guys, I really appreciate the time. I know we're over by a little bit. I hope you I know that Cole's in SF, Tongbo, you're in SF. I hope you'll grab a beer or something, maybe a bubble tea. I heard one of you is really into that. I don't know where that's from. Walter, probably. It's like a Walter.
That was the question from like a long time ago. I think he asked that one. I do enjoy.
But
it's got to
anyway.
be 30% sugar, less ice, and then with the foam on top. I like the cheese foam.
Some good, some very good frameworks from Cole today on bubble tea and from on MRR, bootstrapping MRR. Guys, really appreciate it. We'll let you go. Thank you for everyone who joined. Thank you to Walter for helping put it together. We'll be cutting it up, doing the content the content assembly line will begin after this. But thanks again, guys, and hope to talk soon.
Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.